This year, what I'll be doing is supplementing that with some more AI literacy activities, and also introducing a framework that's designed to help facilitate critical thinking in this area. So the idea would be to go beyond thinking, are you or aren't you allowed to use AI in this particular assessment, but to think about the whole process of the assessment. Personally, I think we need to step away from the hype and hysteria. I think it's really essential for people more broadly, so not just to our students of today, but for everyone to have a better conceptual understanding. You don't all have to be nerds like me who likes to understand the technicalities, but to have a better conceptual understanding of how AI actually works so that they can cut through the hype and hysteria and understand how we can really use it in beneficial ways for society.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Unfiltered by Empowered, the podcast where we explore the evolving landscape of education through real, unfiltered conversation with passionate educators, innovators, and change makers. I'm your host, Anshul Lau, and in today's episode is a deep dive into one of the most timely and important topics in education, the intersection of artificial intelligence and pedagogy. Joining me today is Dr. Zoe, who is a senior lecturer at the University of York and one of the leading voices behind the development of MA in Artificial Intelligence and Technology Enhanced Learning. So this pioneering program supports both educators and technologists to meaningful integrate technology into learning, all grounded into a strong theoretical and ethical foundation. So in today's episode, we'll explore what it means to design a future-facing curriculum, how AI is being used in education, and how this AI program can help us reimagine the classroom, not just the new tools, but with a renewed sense of purpose. Zoe, welcome to Unfiltered by Empowered. To
Hi,
begin
Anshul.
with,
Thank you.
thank you so much for being here. And to begin with, can you tell a little bit about yourself? What has your journey been like in education and technology so far?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me and for that introduction. I don't think I could have presented the purpose of the program as well as you have. Well, thank you for asking about me as well. This is, you mentioned that EmpowerED is a passion project. This is very much for me a passion. In terms of how like the program's designed and what I try to talk about in our core modules, it's very much based on my own experience. And that's my own experience as a learner, starting with my own experience as a child at school. So those early days in primary school when there was just maybe one computer that children could use in the school, through secondary school, where I experienced the arrival of mainframe computers. So first of all, we had those green screen BBC computers where where there wasn't even a WYSIWYGs. So what you see is what you get, word processing. We then
Yeah.
got mainframe that are a bit more like the computers we have today. And the day we all sat clustered around the only computer that could access the internet. I talk about that, show how technology has kind of evolved from my own experience to then my experience at university, where I was studying for a degree in French, but I was studying at the University of Manchester Institute for Science and Technology. So there I was really lucky to be taught through the latest technology. So we did a lot of what might be very similar to the kinds of activities you get in Duolingo, and some of the more drill-based software, say WordWall, that you get today. So we did lots of those types of activities. We used Corpora, so big text databases. So I got to experience technology as a learner. And then I went on to do a PhD. So when I did my PhD was actually the last kind of AI revolution. So this was I started it in the year 2001.
Okay.
This was when there was kind of a big shift in speech technology, where it really became viable to use speech recognition, so computers that listen, and speech synthesis, computers with a voice, and I explored how equipping a computer with a voice might be well, whether it's ready to use for language learners, to give them that unlimited practice that's really needed to develop language proficiency.
Okay.
Since then, I've been researching it, but I'm also a parent. So I'm lucky enough to know or to get insights into what's going on in schools, particularly primary schools. So I've got a 9-year-old. I've explored lots of apps for learning to read. So lots of the kind of phonics activities that are out there. And more recently, he did the multiplication test that they do at the end of year 4? So for a 9-year-old. And so using times table rock stars. And so I've got a real insight into what appeals to children of this kind of age. What are the kind of features we're seeing in those apps as well? And I try to share all of those different experiences throughout the program to make it come alive.
You bring with you such a vast experience, and honestly, the things you mentioned might make our listeners nostalgic about the evolution of computers and things. And even I remember the CD drive, not many people have seen that. Even the floppy that we used to work with when I was little, and this would
Indeed,
be a
I'm
new thing.
searching for a CD drive at the moment because I want to find some historical things I've got to share with people.
Yeah, then good luck finding that if you
Yeah.
find that at all nowadays, because not many people even have been aware that what is a CD drive even. They've not even seen in the computers that we have today. And thank you so much for mentioning that. And also, I wanted to know, so what was that point that triggered you that to or inspired you to make a program like this? And what was the inspiration behind this, creating this program, particularly at University of York?
Well, for a couple of years, I'd run just a single module in teaching and learning with technology, and the feedback that I got on that module, students' experiences, they really enjoyed the module. I got students sort of telling me about how they've gone back to their own context. So a lot of our students have had previous experience as teachers in primary and secondary schools, and they were coming back telling me about how they were, what they learned and how they were applying this in their context. There's also obviously generative AI has really reignited discussions in this area and really reignited interest. And as I said, I have pre-Gen AI experience, and as such, I really felt that I'm in the position to be able to develop something, to develop a program that really gives people insights at a conceptual level into how generative AI and other AI technologies work, which will put them in a position to cut through both the hype and the hysteria, to have a much
Yeah.
better understanding of what we can really do with these technologies once we've got over the hysteria about generative AI and assessment. I've got that background and a real passion for trying to develop applications as well where we harness these technologies. So the other thing that I'm doing is developing proposals for applications to investigate how we can develop apps that integrate speech and language technologies as well.
Oh, that's good to know. So, was there a particular gap that you noticed in current educational programs across different universities that this AITL program aims to address particularly? And tell us more about this
Yeah.
MA program that you have at the university, just to get an outline or understanding of this program.
Yeah, so there are a number of different programs out there. I think for me, I know you've talked about being cutting edge, and we will
Yeah.
absolutely talk about artificial intelligence. But as I said, I've experienced the history of educational technology. And so one of the things that I want to do with the program, and it's something I'm also trying to do with research, is make sure that whatever we do can be applied in schools. So a lot of the research that gets funding is very, very blue skies. It will be about, there'll be a lot of research right now on VR, augmented reality, mixed reality. This technology is not available in schools. So what I want to do is something where we're working with where schools are at. The things that we talk about on the programme are things that teachers can be doing with technology they've got available to them, or with free software, as well as introducing these more blue skies approaches. So it's really, this programme really is about closing that gap between research and practice. It's about filling the gap between so some schools may be not quite as digitally mature as the government would like them to be, and helping them to bridge that gap and to make better use of the resources that are available to them.
Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you so much for highlighting that. So is this program based on, like, have you used any framework particularly, or any pedagogical grounding that program has in
Yeah,
overall?
so yeah, it is very much grounded in what we know about teacher education broadly. So when we think of teacher education, actually evidence suggests that what teachers end up doing in the classroom isn't necessarily based on their teacher education. Their
Yeah,
own learning experience continues to have a significant influence on what they do in the classroom. So if you think about it, myself as a language learner, doing language drills, it used to be writing it out by hand exercises, repeatedly practicing vocabulary, that I found really effective. If I was a language teacher, I don't actually teach language, but if I did, I would be really harnessing the apps that are out there, Duolingo,
yeah,
and the other ones that allow you to do drills. I would be doing that. So that's based on my own experience. What I do on the program for the modules, the program, we make sure that students experience the technology as learners as well. So as well as teaching about the theory and introducing activities that they might design as teachers, technology is integrated throughout the module. So there will be opportunities to experience collaborative writing, for example, using a Google Docs platform.
yeah,
Something I haven't experienced it as a learner, but as a researcher writing proposals with other academics, I realized that, that experience of collaboratively writing myself is really quite important for then thinking about how you design those activities for learners, because we might assume that people intuitively work together, but actually there's a lot of work that you have to do on the non-technology side about orchestrating and facilitating learners' interactions. So yeah, the program isn't just about teaching people how to
yeah,
use technology. It's very much about that learning experience as well. The teaching experience can come from the dissertation, where
yeah.
there's an opportunity to design activities, in a kind of materials design style dissertation. We also have a research-based dissertation as well, where you could take activities out into the classroom, gather students' experiences, teachers' experiences.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think you mentioned earlier that your own experience makes also a lot of difference to designing of the program. So, are there any parts of your teaching practice that have evolved as a result of developing this program?
So I have last year, I did trial allowing students to use generative AI to write their assignment. So for this assignment, we actually translated so normally they'd write a 3,500 word assignment. I split that in two. They wrote 1,500 words on a topic on technology and teaching, as we would normally get them to do. And they were allowed to do that using generative AI, but also using machine translation tools. So most of our students, or a lot of our students, tend to be international students, and therefore that's another AI technology they might be tempted to use. So we permitted them to use these technologies. And then the second part was an opportunity to reflect on that experience. So we encouraged them to complete a log, and then to reflect on what worked, what didn't work, and then what would they advise a student, or what would they advise a teacher who was setting this activity in the future. I learnt a huge amount through that activity, and so this year, what I'll be doing is supplementing that with some more AI literacy activities, and also introducing a framework that's designed to help facilitate critical thinking in this area. So the idea would be to go beyond thinking, are you or aren't you allowed to use AI in this particular assessment, but to think about the whole process of the assessment, of kind of preparing an assignment, from searching for articles, from reading and understanding them, through to writing critical summaries, evaluating articles and synthesis. And the idea would be to get students to share what they currently do. I expect that might be quite AI driven at this point.
Yeah.
And then to get them to think about how they might move from an AI driven approach to AI driven with human oversight, through to human in the loop, through to human driven. And so I see this as a tool that will be used on the program to get students to engage more deeply in deeper thinking about how they use generative AI. But also, I'm planning to use this with my colleagues in the department as a tool to help us to think more deeply about what the guidance is that we give students and what we feel that they should be permitted to do.
That's really helpful. And you mentioned about the framework. Does the framework have any name as such that you're using? Is it an established research framework that any of our listeners or anybody can access
So
later?
yeah, this is something that I'm kind of developing as an
Yeah.
outcome from that experience. So I've seen other frameworks out there that are more a tool for helping decide whether or not, so for opening up that discussion. What I'm hoping to do is to combine, and I don't think I've seen a name for this scale, but this
Okay.
scale that goes from AI led through to human led, and then to combine that in kind of a grid format with a framework. And I've explored different possibilities. Initially, I was thinking about the reading writing process and whether there's kind of a scale that we can use, not a scale, but a categorization we can use there. What I've kind of landed on at this point is something. So there's an article that combines Bloom's taxonomy and kind of relates it to the process of writing. And so I'm going to, at this point, I'm using that, but I'm open to kind of combining two different things and discussing with certainly in a workshop with colleagues, looking at whether there are any alternatives there. I'm quite taken though by using this adapted Bloom's
Yeah.
taxonomy, because I think it could be used for written assignments and adapted to any assignment. And it really works as well, I think, with not just generative AI, but with machine translation. I think the comprehension element allows us to bring in both. And that's what I'd really like to do.
Thank you so much. And for our listeners, I'll just elaborate. Bloom's taxonomy is a hierarchical framework for classifying educational goals, promoting higher order thinking skills, and guiding the development of learning objectives, as Zoe was mentioning too. So I just wanted to give you some clarity around that. And Zoe, curriculum design in this space must involve a lot of future gazing, particularly. So how do you decide on what to include now versus what might be too soon?
Um, hmm, that's a little, yeah. Well, I think a lot of what we cover for me are practices that have been talked about in research for a long time. Whether those practices are widely adopted is another thing. So a lot of what we cover is that.
Okay.
In terms of, so for example, on this session on multimedia, I will cover well-established multimedia learning theory, talk about that in relation to well-established tools. So, for example, in UK classrooms, interactive whiteboards have been there for a while. We've also got software packages for learning. They've been around for a long time. So we'll evaluate the framework in relation to that. But obviously, what you can then do is at the end of that sort of session, draw in the kind of latest developments in VR. And actually, in relation to that, what I'm hoping to do is to take the students to our creative technologies lab. So we have a lab actually where any student on campus can go and try out these technologies. There are tools there as well for developing games. So I think they've got I think it's called Unity, which is a tool for game development. I'm also hoping to take them to, I think we've got an immersive technologies lab. So there's a department, a school of arts and creative technologies where they're actively developing these kind of the latest VR, immersive audio. So my aim is to be able to take students there, but also to just to add some other lived experience in there. This year when I went on holiday, I was lucky I went to Sicily, and as a family, what we tend to do is we like a holiday where we're visiting, we'll visit the local churches, we'll visit lots of historical sites. And where we went, almost everywhere we went, there was an opportunity for a VR experience. So to give one example, we went to a church, and I can't quite remember which one it was now, but that church had many different instantiations. So it had been a Roman a Roman church, partially destroyed and then rebuilt. And essentially what the VR did was it took you through those different versions of what the church looked like. And so I thought that was really, really interesting. And I think one of the things I will talk more on the program and on the different modules about teaching and learning in schools, but where you start to see some of these technologies coming in and they are a reality is in museums, for example. And obviously that relates to schools because children go on field trips. So one of the other things that I hope to do, I believe at the National Railways Museum, they've got a new immersive experience or VR experience. I've not been there yet, but I'm hoping to go and explore that myself. And we might do our own little local field trip to have that experience as well.
That's a wow. Basically, your program includes field trips, people having access to the virtual reality labs as well that you have. So are there any ideas that you have parked for later? Everything is in
I
this
actually want to pick
quote
up on the
itself.
futures thing as well. So
Okay.
coincidentally, that point about futures in the first module. So from my research, I've been really thinking about how futures thinking is a really good way to bridge the gap between what teachers are doing now and help them to develop plans to achieve sort of what their vision of the classroom in maybe 5 years' time. And so inspired by some research I read, I mean, this is from quite a few years ago now. I've wanted to replicate this piece of research for some time. So there's a researcher, Neil Selwyn, I think he's based in Australia, and he'd done some work with children. I think these were primary school children. He'd got them to draw pictures of their vision of the classroom of the future. More recently, he's been doing work with students and also expert teachers, and got them to write kind of narrative visions of the school of 2030. And these kinds of activities can be really great activities for teachers to raise their awareness of what their pedagogical beliefs are, what they think is the best way to teach, and also what their values are. So when you do kind of futures thinking, you don't just think about the idealized classroom of the future, but you can also present people with dystopian visions, worst case scenarios, and also what they see as the likely vision. So this might be, given the way technology is going or given government initiatives, this is what we think most likely. So what I plan to do in the first module is to, having asked students to share their kind of current practices and also their experiences as learners and reflected on them, to then expose them to visions from these different articles and also get them to create. So we might do this using technology. We might do it by getting magazines from the British Educational Technology Trade Fair and cutting them up and making a collage to create their own visions of the classroom of the future. And then to step back and think, okay, so if that's the vision, how am I going to get from where I am now to that future? What help do I need?
Okay.
What do I need government to do? What training do I need? And what do I need to do myself for that to happen?
No, that's really good to know that your program has a critical element of engagement as well as reflection as well to see what difference can be made. And you also mentioned that you'll be involving students also for reflection. So what role does peer collaboration play in this program, especially when you would be having mix of educators and technologists also pursuing this program?
So you're right that that is the aim is, and the program is open to students from diverse backgrounds. So it doesn't matter whether you did a degree in French, a degree in maths, or a degree in computer science. If you can articulate in your personal statement that the value that you see this program giving you in the future, then you would be welcome on the program. So the program, I do imagine most students enrolling will be teachers or planning to become teachers. But there are many possible career routes that this program could really set you in good stead for, including being a learning technologist, so someone who's more supporting teachers and lecturers, but also someone who's interested in designing apps. So the training won't be in like coding, so don't be afraid of that if you're coming from a teaching background. It will more be about thinking about how do you design activities for learning. So if someone's got the technology knowledge, so they've got a prior degree in computer science, IT, media, then what they would gain from the program is understanding learning. So we cover theories of learning. How do people learn? What conditions need to be in place? What processes do they need to engage in? And then think about, well, how can the affordances, the features of technology be used to help create those conditions and engage learners in those processes? So I'm really hoping that the program will bring together people with these diverse backgrounds, and they will also learn from one another and have those networks that will be really supportive in their future careers as well.
So in terms of assessment, do you have a lot of peer projects, like group projects, particularly individual essays? And I'm also anticipating, as you mentioned earlier, I believe students will be allowed to use AI to write their essays.
Yeah,
Am I right?
so the assessments themselves tend to be individual, but in the one module, that assessment will be based on experiences throughout the module. So this kind of there'll be a futures thinking workshop where they'll share their visions of the classroom of the future with one another. But they will then write an individual summative assignment. So summative being the one that your mark's based on. There will, however, be group presentations as well. So I tend to make those a bit lower stakes because my experience, I've done lots of group assessment on other programs, and that tends to cause a lot of anxiety. So the preference is to give those opportunities for those experience and to make sure that students are given feedback that they can use in job applications and that they can use for further development. But we don't tend to include that in the high stakes assessment just because of the level of anxiety that it creates.
Okay, and the idea about them using AI for writing their essays, particularly, so is it about them feeling more empowered, or do you think it might even raise questions about them, about authorship and authenticity also?
So it's to help them develop prompting skills, these
Okay.
skills
Yeah.
of the workforce of the future. It's also to help them. Obviously, we talk about assessment and the assessment rules and authorship and creativity, all the issues that come with AI, hallucinations. It's
Yes.
designed to raise their awareness. But also, from another perspective, we'll obviously talk about the ethics of
Yeah.
artificial intelligence, talk about the energy that it consumes, and copyright issues as well, along with authorship. Thinking about, though, climate and energy consumption, students actually will have the option as well to opt out. If they opt
Okay.
out, they'll need to write an essay on why they are not going to write their essay with AI and explore
Yeah.
those issues. However, from my perspective, I actually think it's quite important for students to have that experience of writing an essay with AI, because what I hope it will do is help them to be more judicious in their use of artificial intelligence. So rather than just putting in prompts willy-nilly and using a lot of resource,
Yeah.
what they'll actually do is be able to craft prompts really well. So the first output that they get is really high quality, and they don't need
Yeah.
to banter so much with the system to get the output that they need. So I hope that it'll actually help them to think critically and, well, and
Yeah.
also to ask, is AI the right thing to be using for this particular task? So I've done, things myself. I've tried to write an essay myself using AI. I do myself ask why you would do that.
Yeah.
But that's because I know the literature and things like that. I
Yeah.
really
Absolutely.
value reading and understanding. But what I have come to realize that there are some ways in which, for me, that tool could be really useful. And that's where I'm using it in a more human-led way, giving it text I've already written,
Yeah.
perhaps asking it to cut some words for me or to translate it into different formats. So I gave a presentation on the program once, and a little bit like I told you at the beginning about my own personal history. And I got some notes from that, and there was an opportunity to do a newspaper style article, like for a magazine on the program. So I thought, you know what, let's pop it through the tool, see what it does. Say, here, write me a news article. And that was really great. It wasn't as humble as I'd be, I have to say that. So I did have to ask it to be a little bit more humble. But that, that I felt was really, for me, that's maybe a more judicious use. It's using it to save
Yeah.
time, but not, I'll certainly be talking about whether artificial intelligence is really intelligent,
Yeah.
whether it really understands. That's certainly one thing we'll talk a lot about on the program.
So that's really pleased to hear that basically the students on your program would be getting a critical insight on the potential and the capability of AI, and also to be able to evaluate that. So how, I think you also mentioned the program touches on ethical usage also. So how does your program approach the ethical dimensions of AI in education particularly?
So we'll absolutely be talking about AI literacy. So there are two modules. The first one is very much links up pedagogical, so theories of learning and development, and technology. The second module is called Key Issues and Debates. And in that module, one of the topics that we'll start out with is literacy, thinking about how our conceptions of literacy have evolved through the evolution of technology, the introduction of the
Yeah.
internet, multimedia, multi-literacies, and culminating with AI literacy. And so we will explore the various dimensions there. So we will be thinking about, obviously, I've already mentioned the real serious concerns about the use of AI and its impact on the climate. We'll also be talking about authorship and copyright. We'll also be thinking about data. So thinking about, obviously everyone thinks about generative AI, but generative AI is a general purpose tool.
Yeah.
If we're going to harness the power of artificial intelligence more broadly in education, then you actually need to collect data on the specific task. So you might need to collect learner-teacher interactions. And so it's really important, if we're thinking not just about using these technologies, but about developing further technologies, to talk about data and talk about people's rights in relation to their own data. And this applies to generative AI as well. You need to be thinking about what you put in the tool and what permissions you've set in relation to using those tools. So on the programme, students will be encouraged to only use university approved tools, because these are tools where we know that the data won't be used to further train the AI models, so the large language models.
Oh, that's brilliant. And talking about it, so is there a line you think educators should not cross when it comes to AI tools in teaching or assessment? And how do you
A
personally weigh
line.
that up? Any
I
line that
think
you
this
feel that
is,
people shouldn't cross, any educator shouldn't cross, and how would you personally weigh that up?
I think here it's really about educators making sure that they're engaging with the latest guidelines. And I know this is really tricky because they're evolving and the technology is evolving at pace. But I think we really need to think about ethics and data protection. I think those
Okay.
are the things. And actually, it's just about stepping back, thinking, and applying principles that already exist, and there being wider awareness of those principles, I think.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah, I
And
wouldn't want to draw hard and fast boundaries,
I
because
know.
it's really
Yeah.
difficult to capture all of the possibilities of AI. I'm on working groups talking about this both for research and for
Yeah.
teaching purposes. And it's something that's evolving. So I think really it's about stepping back and taking some critical distance and trying not to be overcome by the hype that's out there about those possibilities.
Yeah, that's good to know. And honestly, you've given a broad kind of outline, but it's still, I think it makes sense. And I also wanted to know, is there any opportunity for collaboration or industry partnership as a part of this program, if anybody is pursuing this program?
Absolutely. At the moment, this is early days for the program, but
Okay.
as the program grows, I really would like to establish collaborations with industry. So currently we have two dissertation routes. So one of them is a practice-based route where students can create teaching materials and they reflect on their experience of doing that. The other one is a standard empirical dissertation. So this is where students would do some research on an existing application, though they could do some research on futures thinking even, and ideas people might have about apps for the future.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd like to do in the future is to work with app developers, maybe even organizations, schools, who would set projects for students. So maybe there's a question that a school or group of schools have about how to deploy technology, and then that could be a scenario for students to do their own research on. Equally, a company might have some ideas for a future app,
Yeah.
and they might want to understand what's the latest evidence in relation to this. So I could imagine students doing, gathering that evidence and reviewing it, and preparing a report for those companies. Equally, they might have a tool, and they might have some data, hopefully that's been collected, all data protection. They've thought about the same sort of concerns about us. And if they're doing that, then there might be the possibility for our students to work with the data that they've got,
Yeah.
and to provide them a report on that data. So I think that the possibilities are endless in a way. I'm
Yeah.
really open to exploring those with anyone, whether that be whether that be sort of schools or other professional bodies who are interested in technology and education, but also with companies that are developing apps.
And I am guessing and anticipating the students on this program will be prepared to basically lead those conversations with the developers and the policymakers. Am I right?
So I think initially, I think I would expect there wouldn't be a huge amount expected of the companies.
Okay.
I recognize, I think you have to kind of start small. Initially, I think I'd be looking for anyone who was interested in this opportunity to provide a short brief. So a short outline
Okay.
of the context and scenario, possibly if they wanted to prepare a little video to introduce their company or organization to the
Yeah.
students, that would be really helpful. But there wouldn't be any expectation of long-term engagement with the students. Depending on how things evolved, there obviously we could look to greater levels of engagement. But my experience talking to companies so far, I think, it could be
Yeah.
a lot to expect for them to be coming in, delivering sessions, working collaboratively. So initially, it
Yeah.
would just be about setting that scenario,
Yeah.
and then we would be giving the trainings in the program in educational technology, learning theory, but also in how to carry out research or how to design materials.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always an evolving process that they come and work with the students and eventually evolve into something productive and fruitful for them as well as the students. And talking about the broader ecosystem, are there any trends that you're noticing in how employers are talking about AI related skills in education role that has impacted a design or some elements of this program?
So the design of the program is very much influenced by my experience of attending sort of trade fairs and seeing how a kind of an understanding of also the apps that are on the market. So I don't know, last time I went to a trade fair like over 10 years ago, if you went and you asked questions at trade fairs about kind of the research evidence for their apps or the pedagogical design, they wouldn't really be able to tell you about that. Now, if you go, they certainly can talk about some evidence, and they increasingly companies may have an instructional designer.
Yeah.
However, I would say the field of app design has, for a long time, been very much technology driven. I am seeing, sort of talking to some companies out there, specifically in the speech technology area, that they are starting to employ, I don't know if they call them instructional designers, but people with the understanding of learning theory, understanding of
Yeah.
assessment theory as well. So I think this is somewhere where those opportunities are starting to emerge. And if students do the program, they might be slightly ahead of the curve and
Yeah,
ready to
absolutely.
grab those opportunities as more of them become available.
Absolutely. And I think the title of this role is not, I think, established. Some are called instructional designers, some are called learning designers, in fact.
Yeah.
So but I think I see a point there. And just wanted to check with you, do you feel higher education as a sector is moving fast enough to respond to the changes AI is bringing?
It's tricky because in one hand, um, the sort of rules about assessment, different universities are at different places. Some might seem to be ahead of the curve, but then you could argue on the other hand, have they thought enough about this? It's a real tricky
Yeah,
one. I think, you've got to balance being reactive, reacting
yeah,
quickly, but also there needs to be some thought. If you react, initially in terms of generative AI, a lot of institutions were banning it outright. But if you start to think about this, that's probably not the best
yeah,
approach. And maybe those who are coming in you might have been saying were reacting a little slowly, actually they're coming out with more nuanced guidance, which is perhaps more where we ought to be headed. Because while we need to protect assessment and to protect the rigor of the process, also we need to be thinking about what are the skills that students will need in the future for employment in the future. So it's not always best to react quickly. We do need to think really carefully about this, and this is going to be a long and ongoing discussion. We've got materials, we've got regulations, we've got resources emerging at York, and we're holding a mini conference to share practices among staff. And those communities of practice, they're going to need to be ongoing, because the technology just keeps, everyone started off thinking we've got to protect the written assignment, or we'll replace it with oral assignments. But students can use AI to prepare the script for it, to prepare the slides for it. I mean, I created slides for a talk myself by putting my own manuscript in and generating the slides. But remember there, I did it human-led, and I think that's the key. So it's going to be an ongoing discussion, and we're possibly going to be thinking that we're firefighting for quite some time. But at the same time, we've got to think about what skills do students need in the world of generative AI as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you really rightly said that we need to be mindful and balance that rather than reacting very fast to include anything that as a sector we should respond to. And thinking of this program particularly, if in case you had unlimited resources or partnership, what's something you would like to add to this program? Is there anything that you could think of that
I think I would, if it's more, I think if there was more time, because there is limited time per week with the students. If I had more time, I would be having many more practical activities to give that experience of learning with technology, because I think that will really provide the insights to the range of possibilities that are out there. So I think it's that opportunity to experience technology and to engage with the resources that we already have around campus. There are things like I'd like to do things with microbits and Raspberry Pi, and as well as using the VR technology on campus. But with limited time, I think in a way, I think you have to see the program as a trailer for the possibilities, the movie that is all those possibilities out there.
Yeah, that's you have really brilliantly summed up, saying that it's a trailer. Literally, AI is evolving at such a faster pace that while people will be in the program, there would be new things that could be evaluating or coming across. So, is there a flexibility in the program that as you go along, you'll be adapting that also, or how have you planned the outline of the program particularly?
Certainly, I think so. So certainly at a university, certainly at this university, at the University of York, we have learning outcomes, but the way in which we achieve those learning outcomes within a module can evolve. And certainly, colleagues in our department, and I'm sure this is the same in many universities, where what we regularly elicit student feedback and we adapt our content year on year to the needs of the students. But also in this case, as different apps and possibilities arise, we'll be able to tweak the content and work in different activities, different technologies.
That's good to know. And we're nearly towards the end of the segment of this podcast. And I would like to ask you, if you have to imagine basically the evolution of this program 5 years down the line, what do you hope it becomes?
I really, really hope that we will be able to attract students from diverse backgrounds. I think I'd like to see a program that attracts students from here in the UK, maybe people working as technology leads in multi-academy trusts, so in schools,
Okay.
teachers from various countries all over the world who have access to different resources, more and less resources, but also to attract people who perhaps have experience working, developing technology, maybe just an undergraduate degree, but have worked in a company as well, so that those students who, when they emerge from the program, they've got a real, well, during the program, they've got such a rich resource, not just of those people, us teaching them, but of peers, a rich resource of peers, and a rich network to draw on in their future careers.
No, thank you so much. And is there something you're still figuring out or excited to experiment maybe with the future cohorts?
Um, I have too many ideas. I'm really excited about continuing to explore the
Yeah.
allowing students to use generative AI to write their assignment. And I'm also really excited about the kind of the futures thinking workshops. I think that's probably enough to think about right
Yeah,
now.
absolutely.
Industry collaborations would be great, but plenty to be working with there that I'm sure will spark other ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have to give one advice to institutions looking to design similar programs or bring more AI literacy into their curriculum, what will that be?
So I think sort of stepping back from AI and thinking about technology more broadly, for me, I think it's about bringing together technology and pedagogy and really promoting a pedagogy-driven approach. So uh, I'm not particularly a fan of throwing the baby out with the bathwater and all
Yeah,
this
yeah.
disruption, and it's going to transform education. We need to work with teachers where they're at with the resources that they've got and help them to identify how they can use technology to enhance all the good things that they're already doing.
Yeah, that's a brilliant suggestion and advice for our listeners and other institutions. And one last thing also want to ask you, for any educators, prospective students, technologists considering enrolling onto this program, what would you say is the most unique or transformative part of this AITEL program or as an experience that they will get?
I think So I think there are three things. This is pedagogy driven. So it's not technology driven, it's pedagogy driven and experiential. So learning through technology, there's that opportunity to use AI to learn through that experience. And then really that futures thinking, imagining that classroom of the future and starting to think about what your plans are to achieving that.
Thank you so much. And for all our listeners, we'll include all the links where you can find more information about this program, particularly in the description of our YouTube video and also all our podcast platform. And Zoe, this is the new segment we want to introduce as from this podcast onwards. If entire world was listening to this podcast, what will be one message that you would want them to know about AI? And we just want they should hear you and your message that you want to give about AI to entire world.
Well, personally, I think we need to step away from the hype and hysteria. I think it's really essential for people more broadly, so not just to our students of today, but for everyone to have a better conceptual understanding. You don't all have to be nerds like me who likes to understand the technicalities, but to have a better conceptual understanding of how AI actually works so that they can cut through the hype and hysteria and understand how we can really use it in beneficial ways for society.
Thank you so much, Zoe. And before we close, where can listeners find more about your work or get in touch with you for future of any further discussion if they need to. We'll include all that information in the bio, but if you can briefly tell us, that'll be really helpful.
Okay, so if you search for the Masters in Artificial Intelligence and Technology Enhanced Learning at the University of York, you should find the pages about the programme. You can also search for myself, Zoe Handley, at the University of York, where you will find information, well, links to the programme, links to PhD opportunities if you want to research this. I'm really open to innovative ideas for research there as well. And there you will also find links to work from the group that I work with, so from the language education group, where we do other work on language, and the group who are doing work with me on technology. So a lot of that tends to be on language and technology, but also we do have other researchers working on mental health and well-being and technology, so the influence of things like social media, and others thinking about technology in low resource contexts, and kind of the role of industry there. So taking a more critical eye on some of the social issues as well.
Thank you so much, Zoe. And for all our listeners, we'll include all the links as well as contact details for Zoe in the chat. If in case you would like to get in touch for more information or collaboration, please do that. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. A heartfelt thanks to Zoe for joining us and sharing rich insight into the design philosophy and the real world impact of MA in Artificial Intelligence and Technology Enhanced Learning program at the University of York. From empowering students to designing their own classroom of the future, this has been a powerful reminder that technology alone does not shape education. It is people, educators like Zoe, and learners who would be enrolling into this program who would do though. And if today's conversation inspired you, and make sure to subscribe to our Unfiltered by Empowered on favorite platform as well as YouTube channel. New episodes are regularly released, and we may have more exciting guests ahead. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep reimagining education and always stay empowered. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Anshel. Really appreciate the conversation. It was really, really interesting. Thank you.